KitGuru is with MSI components at Computex 2024. We're starting, as you can see, with motherboards, and we have here the new X870 boards. These are AMD refreshes over X670. There is no X770, and truth be told, the chipsets haven't changed one scrap. We still have socket AM5, and they're for DDR5 memory. PCI Express Gen 5 is a key feature. However, MSI has done a big job on styling. On the left, we have the Pro X870p Wi-Fi. Looks very smart. Apparently the BIOS will be slightly cut down because Pro people don't need to go delving. As you can see, all the heat sinkery, and I've invented a new word there, has very sharp 90-degree corners. Angular would be the word. And we have a single heatsink on the primary M.2. And then down below, we have expansion slots. And here we have a bare M.2 slot and another. Next to that, we have the MAG 870 Tomahawk Wi-Fi. Tomahawk is meant to be the budget brand. It's clear they've moved Tomahawk up the food chain. It's no longer, not exactly bottom tier, but close to bottom tier. Pro's down there. Tomahawk looks really smart. The heat sinks on the VRMs look absolutely lovely. There's some work's gone into those. Also, the heatsink on the primary M.2, that's a piece of work. And notice the other M.2s, 2, 3, and 4, also have heatsinks. We did not previously see this kind of attention with Tomahawk. Worth mentioning, the new, in inverted commas, X870 chipset supports USB 4, so we can expect to see that on these motherboards as well. Interesting stuff. Moving on, we have Project Zero, and if you look, I'm going to put my fingers on it, we have a CAM2 module. We saw a prototype of Zeus motherboard at the G-Skill stand, but MSI is going production with CAM2. And then we clip on the heatsink, and just look at that. Not only Project Zero, i.e. rear cable connections, but very low profile memory. This is incredibly smart, and I love the look of this design. This is apparently coming very soon. To the right, we have what they describe as Intel Memory Innovation Design. So it's Z790, currently LGA 1700, but this will apparently be carried over to the next gen. But look at this, Mini QDIM. They're being a bit vague about this. Apparently it's going to be conventional DDR5 in a different form, probably by Micron or Kingston, and this is going to be incredibly fast overclocking memory. So this is going to be a performance board mainly for benchmarking, but we can expect to see this at some point on LGA 1700, but certainly on next gen. And on the subject of next gen, go bottom left, Dominic. A motherboard signed by Pat Gelsinger. MSI to awesome Pat Gelsinger, the man himself. This is next gen, in other words, Arrow Lake. We're expecting to see this at the end of this year. We believe LGA 1851, but they're being a bit vague about the socket, not that much matters. You can see the VRMs around the socket are much like the VRMs around an existing LGA 1700. Just flash up here, Dominic, for a moment. So this, and then back to the next gen. But it does not mean that that is necessarily what the next gens will be like. It's just a prototype, and it's the carrier of Pat Gelsinger's signature. Above that, we have an Expander Aero Gen 5 SSD card. As you can see, Gen 5 by 8. And then we have two M.2 carriers. So the two M.2s each get Gen 5 by 4, obviously under this heatsink, under my thumb. Nifty. This will be included as an accessory with various high-end MEG motherboards. MSI is working to make our life easy, or at least easier. So this is another next-gen motherboard. So we have the graphics release, a button there, engaged, and now lock back. Nice and easy to reach. There is apparently, right by my finger, a tiny little moving logo, which is supposed to tell you open and locked. I cannot see what's going on there, but they assure me it's true. We have an easy, what's it called? Easy Clip 2. Behold. And also behold. And look at this. This is genuinely good. Easy antenna connections. If you can see there. You don't have to screw it in place and lock down the collar. You literally push and pull. I like that a lot. And similarly, look. That's the kind of thing that for the home builder isn't such a big deal because you use these kind of features once. We reviewers use them all the time, and that's welcome to see. Project Zero PC build. Look at the beauty of this, Dominic. All white, liquid cooling, no cables on show, and as you can see, to the right of the CPU socket, they've got a water-cooled CAM2 memory module. A few years ago, I would have struggled to believe that MSI could come up with such a clean build in one of their own cases, but they've done it. Well done, MSI. This looks absolutely spiffing. And I'm going to close off my part of this video with the Spatium M560 SSD. PCI Express Gen 5, as it says. The significant thing here is the Phison E31T controller, which is brand new, fabricated at 7 nanometers at TSMC. Obviously, it looks exactly like an M.2 SSD because it is. It is claimed to have up to a 15% reduction in power consumption. MSI thinks this means they can cool a Gen 5 SSD under the heatsinks on a motherboard, but they're not swearing that, they just think that because this is brand new to them as well. Also, the transfer rates are up to 10 gigabytes per second. That means it's actually slightly slower than some other Gen 5 SSDs at the moment. So it's a kind of a combination of good performance, really good performance, lower power and much better cooling. And when we go to the right, to the Spatium M580 with its enormous heatsink, that's what we're competing with. If we can get away from this, if they can even cut the heatsink down to that, I think that's a good move. If they can truly go motherboard cooling, then absolutely excellent. New Phison controller inside a new SSD from MSI.
And we've now switched over, it's me, Dominic here. We've got a couple more SSDs before we move on to look at some other monitors and graphics cards. So this one here is a humble SSD enclosure. The idea being you get whichever SSD you want in a variety of form factors, install it in the enclosure, and then you can take it with you. That's using the USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 x 2 interface, which is, as we know, 20 gigabits per second transfer speeds. It's also IP68 rated, so I guess waterproof, splash-proof, what do they say? Is protected from total dust and water immersion for 1 meter up to 30 minutes. Very nice and handy. Arguably more interesting though is this. You might think MSI is making phones. They're not making phones, they're making this. So this is actually a external SSD or external storage. It supports USB 4, so up to 40 gigabits per second, and the idea is it's magnetic. So you might want to stick it on the back of your phone, as you can see here. However, you also get included in the box a magnetic ring, so if your laptop, for instance, it won't stick to the back ordinarily, you attach the little ring and it can snap on. I personally think it makes more sense for laptops. I think this looks a bit neater, whereas I'm not sure I'd want that bulky thing on the back of my phone. But certainly if you want to add up to 4 terabytes of storage, they tell us this could be an easy way of having something rather sleek and rather external. And now we've moved on to graphics, so this is where I'm starting to get really excited. MSI here is showing off what they call the 4090 Supreme Fusion. It may not look too unconventional from the outside, but we can get a look at the cooler in just a second. Effectively, the idea is MSI is taking an all-in-one liquid cooler, slapping it onto the PCB, but it's entirely self-contained within the shroud of the graphics card. You might remember I actually looked at something kind of similar when we did a showcase for an Acer Orion X back in December, and as Leo is showing us here now, you can see we've got the block which sits on top of a copper plate contacting both the GPU die and the memory. MSI also tells us they deliberately shortened the tubing, which could increase pressure by up to 10%, they tell us. And obviously we're looking at a 240mm radiator here. If Leo, you come over now to the top, if we can get a top-down view, I don't know if that's going to be possible with reflections, but you might just be able to tell that the front 3 rows of fins are a lot denser than the rest at the back, and MSI tell us this is done very deliberately. It's all meant to be optimized for either allowing for cooling the VRMs or allowing airflow to come up through those radiator fins. At the moment, this is an early prototype. I personally would be very surprised if this hits the market as a 4090. Where I see 4090, I'm reading 5090, so I personally think that's going to be more likely for either the end of the year or maybe early next. And here we have what MSI is calling its AI-generated graphics cards. I highly doubt this will ever come to the market, but it looks very cool. It's got a nice green dragon, and if we can come all the way around, Leo, we can see probably what makes this very special as I move a few things out the way. And finishing up, we've got the other AI-generated graphics cards, this time with a silver dragon. But as you can see, it's signed by Mr. Jensen himself of NVIDIA, which obviously adds at least 3 zeros to the price of each of these graphics cards. So you may remember back at CES, MSI announced its Expert graphics card, which was kind of an MSI take on the Founders Edition with the one fan on the underside, one fan on the top side. Now this is getting the Fusion treatment, which as we just saw means that it's getting the internal all-in-one liquid cooler. If we just pan over to see the cooler in the box, Leo, you can see this one is a bit smaller, a bit more stripped back. It's only got a single 120 unit, but again, the idea is the same. You've got the CPU block contacting the die and the memory via the copper base plate, and then you also have obviously airflow coming from both of those fans, which is designed to offer extra cooling. This one is only going to be a 4080 Super, so maybe for, let's say, 5080, as the power demands will likely be lower. So the smaller radiator isn't working so hard to dissipate as much heat as it would be from, say, a 5090. But again, it looks very interesting, and I'd love to get hands-on with one of these to see just how well the cooling works. And now we're moving over to peripherals. There's a couple of things that have caught my eye here. This is MSI's take on it's their most high-end wireless gaming keyboard. I think it's their first ever wireless gaming keyboard. As you can see, up to 8K polling rate. And we're also using MSI's own switches here, I believe. To me, it looks a bit reminiscent of the Corsair K70, but you also have the tri-mode connectivity, so you could have it wired if you want, but it also supports Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz or Bluetooth. And then over here you have a little media roller, which feels nice and tactile, and then a few media buttons. Just next to that, we have MSI's Clutch GM51 mouse. This is this one on the left here. It is their most high-end mouse so far. They're making a lot of interesting claims. It is, I would say, in the shape of the Logitech G502, so that has mass market appeal, and you've got 13 different programmable buttons. As you can see, this stand here is actually a Qi wireless stand, so if you snap it on like so, you can have your wireless charging that way. And again, this also supports tri-mode connectivity, so you can have the 2.4 gig wireless, Bluetooth, or the wired mode. And now moving over to look at some monitors. So I'm extra excited. We'll start off with this. This is a 27-inch mag monitor. So this is an OLED. We're going to get to OLEDs in a minute, but the key thing here is white. MSI tells us, I think this is at least one of their first ever white gaming monitors. We know white peripherals and white PC components are a growing market, and now if you want a 4K monitor in white, here you go. Moving over to the left now, here we have the MAG 321 UP QD OLED. So I've already reviewed the 321 URX, and it's more or less the same 4K QD OLED panel, but this time it's a 165 Hertz refresh rate. So being a MAG, it is a step below the MPG series, so we have a lower refresh rate, but that should mean a lower price point as well. Driving 4K at such high frame rates is difficult, so if you can't hit up to 240, maybe it makes sense to go for the lower refresh rate, because chances are you're probably not going to be exceeding that anyway. And we also remember there was a bit of controversy that these MAG monitors would not get firmware updates, but MSI have now confirmed to us that their MAG OLED monitors will have firmware updates. So if they make any changes to how the HDR behaves, or there's any bugs that can be ironed out, that can now be updated. Likewise, over here, we now move down to the 27-inch model, and this is again a Samsung QD OLED, but this time 1440p resolution. I actually have the 271, I forget the model name, but it's the 360 Hertz OLED model at home, which I'm testing now. This being the MAG, it's 240 Hertz, so again, you expect it to be cheaper, but it still comes with all the same benefits you'd expect from the OLED panel, including the near instant response times and effectively infinite contrast ratios. This is our penultimate look at a QD OLED monitor. This is, of course, now a curved ultra-wide, the 341 CQPX. The idea is you want your ultra-wide gaming monitor, but still very fast response times and refresh rates at 240 Hertz, and it's got an 1800R curvature. So fairly subtle, but personally I much prefer that to a flat ultra-wide monitor. So I mentioned earlier I've already reviewed the MPG 321URX, but this is the MEG 321URX. MEG, E being enthusiast, which means it is actually a step above. So this one will be a little bit more expensive, but you get some extra features. MSI is calling this actually an AI gaming monitor, and the interesting feature here is this light bar here. You can see it's currently yellow. This works on a game integration mode. What we're seeing here is Monster Hunter Rise. So if I shoot my gun, as you can see, this bar here is linked to my ammo count. So the more I shoot, it's telling me I need to reload. So I go ahead and reload, and now my bar is lit up. I'm personally not sure how AI this is, considering it needs to be done on a per game integration, but certainly I could see this being very useful in first person shooters like CSGO, Call of Duty, that kind of thing. And you can also open up the OSD and choose a few different settings, so it doesn't have to be mapped to your ammo. It could be mapped to something like your health bar, your stamina, that sort of thing. It's fundamentally the same 240Hz 32-inch QD OLED panel as the MPG model, but with added features, and that will drive up the price slightly. So what we're looking at here is, I guess, another monitor, but actually it's on the front of this pre-built system. So this is the Meg Vision X AI, and the idea is here, it's a pre-built system. It's going to be sold through Currys in the UK. We're not hearing it's ready just yet, but MSI is targeting Q4 this year. And the idea is you have this massive, what I want to say they said was a 20-inch screen, and it's touch sensitive. So the idea being, depending what you're doing, you can change between different preset profiles. You enable the gaming mode, maybe the fan speed increases, it will automatically overclock your graphics card, ramp up the fan speed, that sort of thing. And it's interesting, it's an internal connection to the GPU, so you don't have to run any cables out the back of the case and into the I/O on your graphics card. It's all handled internally. And as we can see at the top here, it's been signed by Intel's own Pat Gelsinger. So again, adding a couple of zeros to the price. Still an early concept here. Let us know if you think this would be useful. The immediate situational scenario I can see this being most useful is if you're something like a Twitch streamer, you want to have your PC on the desk, you pull over your Twitch chat or something onto that screen, you don't need a second monitor, and away you go. You can easily game while you're looking at your comments from your adoring fans.
Dominic mentioned adoring fans. On the other hand, we have these, the MPG Velux 300R, a witty name for a 160mm fan. And just look at the fan blades. We've got an inner and outer ring of blades. Never seen anything like it. And 160mm, that's a new size on me. And this seems an appropriate point to sign off from MSI Components at Computex 2024. Remember, it's KitGuru.net on the web, and we're on TikTok. Like, subscribe, and give us thumbs ups.
Can come all the way around, Leo. We can see probably what makes this very special as I move a few things out the way. It's sorry about that. Take two. Oh no. Where is this? I'll just hold that. Sorry about that. It's only tech testers.
Is it Tech Testers Award?
I think it might have been.
Dominic has broken Tech Testers Award.
I'll apologise to Nada and Stefan in person.